Let's go. Hello and welcome to another episode of Cosmic Surfers. I'm here with Cacey Blackburn, Herbalist, Psychic, Oracle, many hats, Counsellor, breathwork teacher, and it's Happy Solstice, Summer Solstice in the Southern Hemisphere. So welcome, Cacey. Thanks for coming.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So I am very much looking forward to this discussion because you're a person that has taken some of these particular studies, whether it's through breath work teaching, like, you know, rebirthing breath work, or the herbalism direction, and having your own innate abilities has, in my opinion, given you an ability to build relationships with things like the plant kingdom, and, you know, the way that you make your tinctures and medicines and tune in, so to speak. And then you also are quite experienced in what people would label the shamanic world, I guess. And so as we find ourselves in this solstice, you know, I was feeling called to kind of get out in the hot sun and go for a big hike and go for a swim with the blue lilies, and kind of felt more of that kind of fire energy. But I know that you have a unique perspective and going through your own thing. So I'm very interested to hear. Welcome, and I'm very interested to hear on you know, your recent process of what you're going through this solstice. So, how's it been for you?
Yeah, I've been really leaning into doing some kind of opposite work for this last few weeks coming up to this solstice. So I'm quite I'm a person that spends quite a lot of time in my head, and it's something that I'm aware of. So I've just been noticing a lot that I have a strong desire to kind of move into a more of a childlike state in the last 3 weeks. And I feel like that's my own kind of inner voice pulling me towards balance, because I've been very busy intellectually with writing assignments and doing a lot of head-based stuff. And so, like, the last few weeks, I've kind of had a calling to go back to like a state that I felt like I really occupied when I was about 3 or 4 years old, where I felt like I was really away with the fairies and quite detached from reality, and very, when I say reality, I mean kind of like the busyness of life and the, you know, the daily grind, as some people might call it. Like, I've just been wanting to kind of walk around the garden and just look at the insects and not really pay much attention to what time it is or where I am, but to go into the place where I felt like I occupied really easily as a child and just escape for a while. So I guess if you wanted to kind of relate that to the solstice, I would say that it's probably my own inner compass trying to pull me, you know, out of my head and back into a place of wonder and living more in the moment, which is a very natural place for me personally to be. Like, that's where I prefer to be. But like a lot of people, like, I was kind of encouraged as I grew up to kind of get out of that space and occupy more of a like a head focused, like very grounded experience. And I think it's kind of in the kind of the, I guess if you want to call it like the spiritual crowd, groundedness was very important for a long time, or has been a very important thing, because like the worst thing ever is like if you're like this airy fairy ungrounded psychic who, you know, just floats around and doesn't know how to like really connect with the earth and everything. That's kind of frowned upon. And so I've just had this realization in the last couple of weeks that I actually want to be away with the fairies. I actually feel like a part of my experience now, like this transformation of this year, has been to let go of being a very grounded, present, kind of like stable and steady personality, which I have done a lot of for counselling for other people and things like that, because you need to be the anchor in that scenario. And now I'm just like actually realizing that I might just undo some of that messaging about not being allowed to be away with the fairies. I might actually just occupy more of that space, because it feels right for me to go back and reclaim a lot of that kind of very innocent, free-floating, connected energy that I had as a child, where I would see things, you know, in a very like a close-up detail. Like I would notice every detail of every single thing in such a strong way that I would forget what time it was and where I was, and, you know, that I might be supposed to be going home for lunch or whatever. I would just be like wandering through the creek and not, you know, 3 hours later, there's, you know, mum's looking for me because I'm like, where's Cacey? And they used to call me Spacey Cacey because I was just like in my own world. And I feel like for some reason, and I don't really know why, and I don't really care, like I'm not really into analysing it, just right now it feels right for me to go back into that space. So that's what the solstice energy has been pulling me towards, is being very ungrounded and getting just lighter and lighter and lighter, and just being with the fairies, I guess, in a way, and feeling like my head just letting go, and feeling my body just not really being as important. But in saying that, I still have been doing like my standard practices of yoga and like good eating and stuff that I would consider to be my good daily practices, but I'm just not holding myself to a grounded energy. I'm just allowing myself to kind of float, which is a balancing thing for me, like I said. So, you know, relating it back to the solstice and being at a turning point of the balance shifting, we are kind of moving in towards whatever energy we need to balance us. And I think each person, that will be different for each person. That's just what it's happening for me, I guess, not necessarily right for everybody else.
So I listened to a video from the winter solstice from a guy, Will Keller, who's in a natural law community. And he was talking about that one of the things that he feels is missing is this ability for self-defense, especially in the kind of new agey kind of a crowd. And then also one of the other things he talked about was the it's the year of the snake and moving into the year of the horse. And then, you know, some of the things I remember from, you know, when, you know, because you're a horse person as well, like, you know, when, you know, having a relationship with that horse but yeah, also the forward motion. So, and we kind of had a little bit of a talk just before we got started. And so I know you're going to see things completely different. So I just wanted to kind of maybe do a bit of a brain dump, a solstice brain dump of some of the things that are going on in the world and some of the things I'm seeing, or some of the energies or whatever. And I know that you don't necessarily see it that way. So I want to get your take from, you know, so, you know, there's a few strings to pull out here. So one would be the dark occult. So one of the things that's happening a lot at the moment, whether we're talking about like false flag events or the or the sucking people's energy or their attention into particular events to get outcomes. So there's kind of a segment which are utilizing ritual and are utilizing focused attention for nefarious and dark purposes, using particular dates, like all of that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then so part of it, on a general population outlook, according to what's going on with natural law, it would basically there's a formula for having freedom, which is the more in aggregate that people act in an objectively moral way, if that is in aggregate more than acting immorally, will be free. But the fact of the matter is that right now, a large amount of the population don't even think or act in that kind of way. And so that's why we have a human condition right now, as we speak, already in a state of slavery. And then, so there's an element of those dark occult forces and those things that are in play, which you're familiar with. But there's also people that don't have that familiarity with their own ceremony or ritual. And then there's also the victim part of it, which is like, it's happening to me and all of those kind of things. And then so there's this element of needing to take forward motion action to ignite, rather than just getting stuck in that dialectic, but also to create our way out of this as creator beings, or however you look at it. So there's there's a lot going on there. I've got more to say, but I wanted to kind of have you enter now, because I know that you have different frameworks and see things differently. So, and if you could touch on the specific, like the magic and ritual part, because I think that needs to be demystified a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. I think from an individual perspective, for each person walking whatever path it is that they're here to walk, I think it very much depends on what role that person is here to play. Because yes, it is a part of a collective thing, but at the same time, within that collective, you've got all of these different beings, and they all have their own path. They all have their own kind of process of realization or not. I think people come here to have a particular experience. I see, like, from a big picture perspective, I do see, like, I prescribe to the concept of seeing the earth like as a school, essentially. And you can't really have an opinion about anything really without having a belief system. So for me, I know that I'm talking about a belief system that may or may not be true. It may be a school, it may not, and I'm like aware of that as I think about. We're all just we're all in evolution constantly with our beliefs as well. Like, if we are truly people that are kind of learning things and reflecting, our beliefs are going to be kind of consciously moving and shifting a lot. If we're on a path of kind of self-discovery. And I think for the sake of the conversation, it'll be easier to just talk from the perspective of people who are on a path of self-discovery. Otherwise, it's just too broad, because there are a lot of people that I think are here that aren't on a path of self-discovery. So it's not going to really matter like what they say or do or think to a certain extent, because their purpose is not here to wake up and to help the planet transform. Their purpose might be for something else. So for the sake of the conversation, I'll just talk from the perspective of people that are on a transformational journey, because that's been my journey, and that's probably going to be a journey for many of the people that might watch this or be interested in it. Does that make sense?
Okay.
So with such a big topic, where to start? I I kind of feel like everything that is happening because it needs to happen. That's my, I guess that's my perspective on how things are going. As a practitioner, I can kind of think back to people that I've worked with that have been unwell, for example, and gotten themselves physically into a state where they're kind of pushed into a corner with like physical symptoms or, psychological pain, and then realized from that place that they can't continue or don't want to continue in that state. So they've hit a point where they are catalyzed into deciding that they would prefer to change. And so sometimes when you see things like globally, if you see things getting bad, to me, I guess I'm not particularly concerned about it, because I see it all the time in practice where people have to reach a point of pain before they will decide to do something different. And some people have a really high pain threshold and it takes them a long time to get to the point where they say, you know what, I don't want this arthritis anymore, or whatever it is. And then they go, I'm going to change something here. But at the same time, like some people are very sensitive and only require a small amount of pain in order to decide that they need to change. So again, it's like the canary in the coal mine are the sensitive people speaking up and going, can't you see what's happening in the world? This is getting really bad. Some of the people in the world are not aware of how bad it is. They're not the canary in the coal mine. They live in pain day in, day out. They're not overwhelmed by it. They have a higher tolerance for that kind of thing. So it's going to maybe take them as long as it's going to take to have a realization about the world, so to speak. I don't necessarily see it that way myself, but I don't, as in like, that there's this whole negative thing happening on the planet, because I don't really experience it that way. And so then I guess it can segue into this concept of like, which level of reality are you living in, or which timeline are you choosing?
So the stuff that I've been studying would kind of like push back pretty strongly, I guess, in the sense of what I've come to learn about natural law is that they are universal, non-made principles, which are the governing dynamics of objective reality. So essentially the principles of how nature actually works. And so I guess from that basis, the witch timeline and kind of all of that kind of thing, the human condition, like what you talk about with those people that haven't woken up, it's like, I would argue that we are in a state of, like, the human condition is currently slavery. And so unless as a collective people don't kind of have that moment that you're saying that they're not having, and they start to change the way they think and change the way of their actions, that these systems that are being imposed, whether it's, the digital control grid and digital ID and the transhumanism stuff and merging with robots and all of that kind of stuff, like we are making decisions that are not in alignment with natural law. And so we're going more and more into this position of slavery by not taking that action because of the objective reality of not meeting those conditions of nature. So, and then, part of that is that stagnation and that, that lack of ability to kind of wake up to that pain that people have inside themselves and to decide by themselves as an individual to live differently. So, but yeah, and then there's also the people that do get stuck in that, the dark occult part of that, which would be the outcome that would be wanted, and not to make it some kind of airy-fairy, nebulous thing, but, the point of it is for pacification. And so, that's the outcome that is being delivered right now. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I don't know where I was really going with that, but I guess I was, everyone has their own journey and kind of like choosing timelines and all of that. Like, I feel like there's got to be a path that is kind of the objective reality, I guess, is my pushback on that.
Yeah. And how I would respond is that, like, if that's what you feel passionate about, like if that's what makes, like, if you're like interested in that process of liberating people and helping them to get out of that state of slavery, if that's what they are experiencing, then I would say that the people who feel that way, and that brings up a strong energy for them in their body when they experience that, I would say that is a part of the path that you're here to walk. Those people that have a strong reaction to that feel that they need to stand up and speak about that is a part of their purpose. And so if that's the purpose coming through you with passion, that is the path forward for you. And this is how, I guess, I would see helping people to get aligned with their true nature and their path, which will then bring them into alignment with natural law, because they're living in alignment with their truth at the time. Because, I can relate to what you're saying, because I felt that way probably 20-something years ago when I first started working in this stuff. But my passion and my energy for certain processes has shifted. And so I don't really feel passionate about that anymore. But I feel like if the people in that movement are identifying with that energy and saying, we need to transform that energy, and it's a strong feeling for them in their body, that is their body telling them this is the way forward. And so for you as an individual, that's the way to your freedom, or the next step on your journey to freedom, because the pathway tends to go a bit like this. And in my experience of working in this field for a long time, I've come to kind of see that I never say never, because it's like, as soon as you say, oh, I could never do that, or I'd never believe that, or what's going on there, that's not cool. The universe is hilarious sometimes in the way that it throws you a curveball and says, well, guess what you're going to do now? You're going to do exactly the thing that you said you would never do. So I feel like we've got to be in a process of awareness of if we've got a good connection to our body, and that's our compass, and that's like a whole nother thing of like learning how to turn your body into an antenna that you can trust. If you've got that kind of connection and you hear that calling to speak up or to do a certain action, then that is the next step for you. And I remember an interesting process happened for me in relation to what you're talking about during the COVID situation. And I know that everybody's discussed COVID to death, but I'm just using it in this scenario to kind of give you an example. I'm like naturally quite a pacifist kind of person. I'm not really a big believer in like jumping up and down about things and protesting things and stuff, because generally speaking, I feel you're just giving energy to something that you don't want to energize in that way. And I don't believe in giving energy to things that I don't want to have energy, because I feel like it's counterproductive for me. But during the whole COVID situation, when we were in lockdown and stuff like that, I had some friends around me at the time that we were kind of leaning on each other and supporting each other a bit during this whole process of we didn't really know what was going on. And I was like, for the first time, I think, ever in my life, very much activated to feeling like I wanted to go out and jump up and down and protest against what I perceived was like a big load of bullshit that was going on. You know, and that's a really strange feeling for me, that I was like, Jesus, what's going on here? Because I know myself pretty well. I know what my tendencies are, what I tend to go towards, and what my patterns are, a lot of them anyway. And so I was just like, why the fuck am I feeling like I want to protest? Like, this is really weird. But the interesting thing that I noticed was that my friends that I was spending time with, the ones that would normally be protesting and jumping up and down, they were saying to me, oh, no, I'm not interested in getting involved in this. Nah, I'm just going to stay out of it. Which is really weird, because they were also like normally the type of people that would be up in arms and out protesting, whereas I would just be at home holding a vibration of peace or holding a vibration of whatever it was I was doing at the time and not giving energy to that thing. So it was a good example for me where I felt like there's a reason right now why I am going to shift away from what my normal kind of default energy is, and I want to embody something a bit more active and a bit more of a masculine active principle at this time, which was totally out of character. So I kind of feel like if you're following what feels like the right path for you is, then like natural law is something that comes from within you, because we are nature. Like, we don't need to connect with nature, we are nature. We've all heard that saying now. Like, the collective spiritual community is starting to catch up with a lot of the things that the real teachers have been saying for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. It's now becoming like mainstream meme territory. But yeah, so that was my experience of also, like, in relation to what I was sharing before about your timelines and things like that. COVID's a good example for that, because, you know, there were some people during that whole process of those 3 to 4 years of drama, there were some people that were relatively unfazed and unharmed and didn't affect them whatsoever. And then there were some people that were horrendously affected. And I always find it interesting that, you know, there can be an event occurring in the world, for example, everybody's kind of on the earth, for lack of a better way of putting it, and there's a major event happening, yet some people are being horrifically affected by it and some people are not. And what is the reason for that, if it's not that we're all on our own individual paths and our own individual timelines? Do you know what I mean? Like, I guess it falls back into this concept from a bigger perspective of like, okay, so I incarnated here with a certain number of lessons to learn, with a certain amount of karma that I chose to work through. And my experience on this planet is going to be in alignment with that. And I chose it. And I guess that comes back to the concept of a belief system and whether or not you believe that that's what's happening. So it's quite hard to nail these things down, because some of it does come back to the concept of a belief system. And of course, there are going to be multiple different people that are going to disagree with that belief system. So, I mean, I don't really even know if there is one universal truth that is correct for everything, because I think I don't really know. I don't know if there is one universal truth. I don't know if there is a universal truth that spreads through everything or not. But I know that I'm on Earth, and I know that I can watch the seasons and I can watch nature and I see certain things happen. And I also know that nature can be affected by certain things that we're doing. And so in a way, it is a co-creation as well as a natural process, and those things are happening at the same time. And that's quite like a paradox of opposites, because, you know, if natural law is one thing, but we are like co-creating with nature, then how can it be one thing? Because can't we then affect it?
Yeah, so there's just, I didn't necessarily want to get into, I mean, we can go in this direction, but, you know, there's, you know, just for the people watching, so, so you've got, you know, you've got 8 principles, you've got the 7 principles, and the 8th is encapsulated by care. So 1 is mentalism, the all is mind, the universal is mental, reality is a mental creation. And then you've got correspondence, which is as above, so below. And then as within, so without, a link between universal laws and earthly life. The principle of vibration, nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates, everything is energy in motion. Polarity, everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has a pair of opposites, opposites are 2 extremes of the same thing. Rhythm, everything flows out and in, everything has tides, rhythmic cycles exist in everything. Cause and effect, every cause has its effect, every effect has its cause, nothing happens by chance. And gender is in everything, everything has masculine and feminine principles, creative forces in all things, and then that's encapsulated by the 8th principle of care. But I, you know, we can get into, you know, deep in...
What is that you just read out? What is that?
So they are the 7 hermetic principles, and then the 8th principle is encapsulated by care. So the definition of natural law is that they are universal, non-man-made principles of the governing dynamics of how nature works.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the direction that I wanted to take this was towards personal law and the way that we think about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we are one of those people taking that choice that you mentioned, like during COVID, or kind of how it affects different people, one of the ways that I would think to be able to change our thoughts or to live more harmoniously with nature would be that personal law process. Would you... how would, so you know that process very well. Like, that's something that's coming up for me. Like, what do you have to say about that? I know it's not really a question, but like, if the idea is that, you know, we're not thinking right and we're not taking action, or we're not on the right, whatever language you want to use, I would think that personal law and the way we think about it is one of those keys or a key blockage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, to put it simply, there is a concept that has been a part of many different systems. It's not just been a part of what I've studied, but it's involved in many different systems where it deals with the personality like as being a construct of a collection of different thoughts and energies that relates back to your experiences and also your genetics. And so in a very simple way, you know, personal law is just basically encapsulating all of the things that are inside your memory and your perception of who you think you are. And those things don't necessarily belong to you as a higher being. They belong to memory and ancestors and experiences that may or may not have been for your best interest. So I guess it's just that process, I think, that we're all familiar with. Of one of my teachers used to say to me, "Who does your mind belong to?" And she was a person who had many really great sayings that used to pop out, that used to really make you think about things very deeply. And as a young person, I thought a lot about that statement, "Who does your mind belong to?" And I feel like I'm a philosophical person, so my tendency is to think deeply on things and over long periods of time and see what kind of answers come up about important questions that seem important to me. And so the concept of personal law is that you're not really any of those things that you identify as. All of the things that you identify as are basically just thoughts that may or may not be true. And it's a pretty common way of perceiving things in different religions. It's kind of like a set point zero. You're actually just a combination of energy, earth, air, water, and fire. And anything that you add to that is a belief system that you're giving energy to and making real. Some of these things I would call addictions, because we may have had a certain perception or a certain idea about ourselves over what I would call many lifetimes, or it might be very deeply ingrained in the family unit, and we become quite addicted to these things as thought structures. And we continually see them mirrored back to us because of that, and then we believe that they are real because we think we're experiencing them in reality. So the concept of personal law is just purely that you're choosing to believe certain things that may or may not be real. And so my teacher always used to say that neutrality is the highest state. And when I say highest, I mean probably the state that is the most free. That would be a better way of saying it, rather than high or low. But if you are neutral on a topic or a subject and you do not attach to the positive or the negative aspect of it, then you are giving pure life energy the clearest channel to come through. Because as soon as you move into the left or the right, you're going to be restricting or blocking flow or resisting something. Because if you believe on the left, then you're going to resist the right. If you believe on the right, you're going to resist the left. So a point of like being in the middle of being in neutrality is a place where you can drop what I would call, from a breathwork perspective, personal law. You can drop that thought because you are not buying into anything that you're thinking. Like, your thoughts can come and go. They may or may not be real. I don't think that there's much that we do know. I mean, we can say that we know a lot of things, but it's just beliefs. It's really just belief systems. I mean, a good example of that is when I can't remember who it was now, but when I was studying counselling, this was an example that we had where there was an island of people, and there were the ships that were sailing across the ocean to the island, and the island people had never seen other humans before, and they'd never seen those types of ships before. And so the only person on the island that could see the ships coming was their seer, or their shaman, their village healer, because their village healer was expanded enough in their consciousness to be able to see things beyond what was in the daily life of what they were experiencing. So the village healer said, there are ships coming to this beach. There are people coming to this beach, and nobody else on the island could see those people. They couldn't see them at all because they had no concept that anything existed beyond their own island. They couldn't see it. Their brain and their reality couldn't embrace it until the boats landed and those people got off and essentially pierced the veil of the collective consciousness of that group of people. And then all of a sudden, their collective consciousness was blown open and they could see like Spanish Armada ships and white people wearing caps and shit and clothes that they'd never seen before. So it's a good example of the fact that we can't perceive stuff that we don't believe in or we don't believe is possible to experience. And therefore our reality is only as expanded as we think, as much as we think we're able to see. We have to understand that we are, like, depending on where we're at in our journey, our perception of what reality is can be very limited.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, this is a part of what I was thinking about when my teacher said to me, who does your mind belong to?
Yeah.
Well, for most people, your mind belongs to your family unit, and it belongs to the teachers that you had at school, and it belongs to the church if you're a member of a church. Your mind belongs to the people that trained you from a baby until you go back and analyze each and every belief system structure that you had given to you by others and decide if you A, want to keep it, or B, think it's bullshit and want to throw it out, and then C, come to the realization that they're all just beliefs anyway, and you don't have to have any beliefs if you don't want to, depending on what level of freedom you want to experience. It's the basis of structure, and it's the masculine and the feminine principle. Like, you've got unlimited energy, that's the feminine principle. You've got structure, those are the thoughts. If you want to have some belief systems and some thoughts to give your life structure, it's your choice, you can do that. If you want to float around in the realms like I'm doing right now and feel unlimited, you can throw all of your beliefs out the window. But it's easier to do that if you understand the concept of what beliefs are, which takes us back to personal law, because that's what personal law is. Essentially, it's just basically understanding that your thought system is a created jail that you can choose to be in or not be in.
Right. And yeah, some really key points in there. Yeah, thanks for going through that, because it kind of, there's a few things that come up with, if it, if it starts with our thoughts and our mind, and then the concept of changing our thoughts for a different outcome comes up. So then what you're talking about with who owns your mind, the idea of like stepping into the authority of self-ownership of our mind and the way we think comes up. And then when people start talking about this breakthrough energy and AI, quantum, whatever buzzword you want to use, one of the main things comes up from very sharp people like Catherine Austin Fitz and a range of others is around mind control technology. And so if that's the imposition, then surely with all of these mystery schools and all of these teachings, we know it's know thyself, and what you're just talking about is, knowing who owns your mind. So being able to navigate that is going to become more important, if given that we do know that is happening. So I'm not sure. I know you don't necessarily you have a different way of kind of navigating. So, like, for example, with the rollout of mind control technology, which is trying to affect people's minds and thoughts and all of that, how would you say, like, to navigate it would be like would be a good way to go about that?
I would just disengage from anything that has that kind of flavor to it. And what I find is that I just disengage from energies that I don't like, and then I will come back every now and then from a balanced and stable state, and I will dip my toe in to what's happening out there and just kind of keep half an eye on it without getting too involved, because it doesn't really it's not really something that I'm interested in giving a lot of energy to. I feel like the preparation and the way that I've lived my life for the last 30 years has given me the tools to make decisions about how I interact with the world. That means that I don't get pulled off center and doesn't allow me to become vulnerable to a lot of things, because I've got tools that I utilize that work for me, that keep me in my own center. So I don't, like, things can only pull at you and affect you if you're vulnerable. If you've got like a leaky energetic system that's got lots of holes in it, if you've got addictions, if you've got feelings of not being good enough and you're seeking approval, if you've got if you've got vulnerabilities, anything, I don't care if it's AI, I don't care if it's your neighbor, anything can seek out someone that's vulnerable and manipulate them. So I guess if you want to be on a path of, like getting out of the victim mindset and experiencing life as an authentic, empowered being, then working on your inner strength and your vulnerabilities and your blind spots, that's where it's at. Like, there isn't anything more important than that, because whatever's going on out there is just, it's either going to affect you or it's not, based on where you're at within yourself. Like, that's the way that I see it. I don't, because I don't believe everybody's a victim to slavery. I don't believe that people are being enslaved. I feel like people are here choosing to have the experience that they're having. I don't wait until the person becomes empowered to see them as empowered. I see them as empowered beings anyway, regardless of what their thoughts are, because I'm going to hold the best thought for those people I can, and that is, I see them as a divine being. I don't see them as a slave, because I don't want them to be stuck there. If I see somebody as being healed, it's giving their consciousness an opportunity to move into and grow into an empowered state. Even if they don't believe that they are empowered, the possibility is there for them. Holding space for my brothers and sisters that are here is the best thing that I can do for them. That if I'm not in their living room kind of working with them one-to-one in a session, the best thing I can do is see them as already being empowered. And ultimately, that is the truth in my world. In my world, those people are already empowered. They're already having the best experience that's right for them. Just because other people are looking at that experience and saying, oh, that experience sucks, that doesn't necessarily mean that experience isn't right for them. We don't have the power to judge other people and say that their experience is wrong or bad. Their experience is the best thing for them at this time. That's my take. That's how I see it. If people need to experience this, they will choose that experience. And I believe that we are choosing what we want to experience. We're not victims at all.
Right.
In my view.
Yeah, I think that there's. I actually think both are true, but it's probably another conversation for another time, because I do think that, like for example, you can not give energy to something, and you can have the highest thought and all of that, but that also doesn't mean that there are not objectively other things that are happening that are, like if you walk in front of some kind of weaponized version of a radar or whatever it is, like if that's there, like not thinking about it doesn't mean that it's not there. But I also understand the high level thought.
No, but if I'm not susceptible to that technology, I won't walk in front of it in the first place.
I guess, yeah. But the point is that, yeah. Anyway, this is we're not going to agree on this point, because the concept around the slavery is the system that we're already in, not because of how we think about something, but because of government, because of monetary system, by the ability around private ownership and all of that kind of thing. And so now that there is technology that can people can be it's like there's a series of systems that aren't in alignment with natural law that we didn't agree to, or that we agreed to on some level, which is so it's like not calling someone a slave in the sense of like not seeing them in their highest good or the highest thought for them, but it comes back to this kind of if the fact is that people do have holes in their etheric fields and they're not changing their thoughts, and they don't have that urgency to change or whatever it is, then they are choosing that condition of slavery. And the fact that anyway, it's
Yeah, they are. They're having that experience because I believe that's personally, I think that's what they need to have.
And the fact that some people aren't enslaved doesn't mean that others are not as well.
I don't think it's necessarily wrong. Like I feel like it's kind of like we're getting like really into these details about what's happening here, and then you've got like in the world you've got so many things going on. Like you've got people on the other side of the world that don't even have anything to eat. Like, and we're worried about technology. Like it's really relative to each individual person's experience. Like I feel like our collective experience is very hard to kind of make big sweeping statements about what's happening for the collective, because we're all having very different experiences. And I think travel is a really good way of waking people up to this, because when you travel, you see a lot how other people are living in a very different way to you. And it just kind of like, I feel like it puts a lot of things in perspective. I think it's like when you see how different the world is from country to country, it really like exposes you to what I would call like a bigger plan, from the perspective of our evolution, of our individual and our collective evolution. There's a lot more going on here than just needing to be worried about like technology and slavery and stuff. There are multiple experiences for multiple different levels.
Right, but it's not just those things. Anyway, this is I mean, Yeah, I mean, I know enough about the technology to know that it's been rolled out on a large scale across all of the like a lot of nations, and so I know about the enforced digital ID. I know about the mind control technology. I know it's all not thinking about it doesn't mean that it's not happening, and that's not a slavery system by thinking of it not as one, because it's happening on a large scale worldwide. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just don't feel like having that thought and spending a lot of time putting energy into that concept is necessarily helpful for everybody. That's all.
right, which comes back to the higher sort and the personal law stuff, right? Because at the end of all of the direction I wanted to get with this is in a similar vein, the fact that all of these teachings are talking about knowing ourselves and going within, so we know what our own thoughts are and all of that kind of thing. That's where the personal law stuff came up. And
Mm-hmm.
then with the one of the things that I also got out of the breath work part of it is you know, there's this trend towards immortality being hijacked by all of these psychopaths, where they're talking about being the last generation that dies, or the next generation will be, and they're going to live to 145, and they've got all this technology and all of that kind of thing. It's like a bastardization of this natural pathway of physical immortality, which is known by a lot of groups in the ancient past as well, and gets into that purification process and that breathwork process, and then kind of and this concept of the death urge and kind of processing the death urge and giving stuff to the fire, because on a bigger level, you know, whether there's whatever these technology or the psychopaths or the death cult or the dark occult or whatever you want to label it as, being an external, we also know that kind of as within, so without. We also know this shadow work process. So then the question I would think would be then, how do we clear ourselves of this death urge to be more in this creative capacity, like aligned with life, so more people can get to that position where you're talking about, where they're not affected by outside energies or these other kind of forms of imposition. Because I've personally found that the death urge specifically was kind of like one of those keystone processes in that. So maybe that's where I think maybe things will dovetail, because I think that is that inner journey to change the situation on a personal level.
Yeah. Well, you can go right down like the concept of immortality and all of that, like, and get really involved in that concept, which is a whole nother bunch of belief systems, which my teachers, Leonard Orr, Pauline Wynne, and Sondra and all those people have talked about for ages. And like, that's a whole thing that you can get involved in. Like, that's a whole set of beliefs that you can get involved in. So you are choosing to feed beliefs then that are in alignment with creating new cells and creating new energies. But all that has been to go from like death urge to immortality and then back into the center of neutrality. So at the moment, I feel like it's more helpful to just be neutral about death rather than to try to be an immortal, which is, again, it's just another, like, if you're in immortality, you're in resistance to the left, is in resistance to the right. So again, neutrality again is the answer, because for me, because you can be like super obsessed about doing all the immortal practices and having all of these immortal thoughts. But one of the things that I found interesting when I was studying psychology and stuff as a counsellor was that, and the reason why I don't really practice traditional counselling is because choosing a belief was described to me by one of my teachers as the Titanic is sinking and you're moving the seats from one side of the ship to the other. but the ship is still sinking. But when you choose a belief, you're just basically shifting the seats on the ship from one side to the other. The real question is, how do you get off the sinking ship? That is the real question. So that's where I go with my thinking on immortality, rather than like focusing on, I am a safe and immortal being right now. I mean, I think mantras are really important, and those types of mantras, and I mean, I use the word mantra, but any kind of repeated thought is something that you are impregnating into your own mind. It's a thought that you choose that you want to hold. You repeat it, you repeat it, you repeat it, you repeat it, you repeat it. And I feel like that can do a lot of good. But also at the same time, like, I'm now at a point where I don't do that. I just kind of sit in a point of neutrality, because to me that's an even more powerful space to be. So like everything in the world, like as you've already mentioned, has a process of being like creating and destroying, and that's a part of how the world is currently functioning. To the most of us, like to the however many perspective people that are sharing this experience, where we're still watching somebody die or an animal die, and then someone be born or a plant grow, we're experiencing a creation and we're experiencing a destruction. But I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's all that there is. There are probably, I think, a lot of beings, well, not probably, I feel that there are a lot of beings that live beyond that state of being, that are in a state of creation, and it's not as straight down the line as like life and death. It's more of a grey area around creation. And so I kind of want to move more into that space now. I'm not so concerned about the concepts of immortality as much as I used to be when I was like, and when you need to learn something, you like embody it for a while, like it becomes not your obsession, but the thing that you want to keep learning about until you have satisfied the desire to learn about that topic. And then when you've got what you need from it, you tend to drop it and then come into a midpoint. It's like when we go through the pendulum swing, right, of not knowing about something, finding out something interesting, deciding that that's what we're going to study, and going down the rabbit hole and exploring and getting all the information. And then once we've got what we need, we're like, all right, so I can integrate that now, and let's come back to the central point. Mm-hmm. The central point to me is where it's at, and that's why I feel like the blue lily is such an important plant for the last kind of 30 years up to now, and it still is an important plant, because that's what that plant helps people to do, and that's why it's so present in a lot of the Egyptian symbology as well, because we're in the central point, we're in the middle, we're in neutrality. That's what my training in traditional rebirthing and the personal law process was, not about moving the seats from the left-hand side of the ship to the right-hand side of the ship, but it was about stepping off the ship.
Yep.
Not being attached, like having a high thought, but that's not the end of the process. Like holding somebody in a thought that they are not a victim, that's just a step on the journey. The next part of that journey is to be more in 0 point, like to be in neutrality and not in resistance to what's happening. If you're in resistance to what's happening, you're going to essentially be pushing against something that is happening for you to evolve. And that doesn't make any sense to me, to do that.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I haven't got all the answers because I'm still, learning myself. Because a big part of me really wants to agree with you fully, and then at the same time, from what I've been learning about moral, like true morality and right action, there's this kind of part of it which is around, say, like self-defense and speaking up for what is right, and kind of that pushback is not essentially like a wasted energy of focusing on resistance. It's more of a yes and kind of scenario, where
Mm-hmm.
where part of it is, okay, we have to have self-defense, and also we have to come from a place of this neutrality and kind of going into this part that you're talking about. But I do want to make sure that we get to.
Yeah. I mean, if that's what calls to you, but not everybody is designed with the right temperament and the right life experience to fulfill that energy. And I think that each individual person has a part to play. Some people are here as agitators. Some people are here to heal. Some people are here to create waves. I feel like not everybody has to do everything.
No, they don't.
We,
No, they
we
don't.
have to do the parts that we are created for. Like my particular gifts that I was born with as a soul have made me perfect for the role that I'm playing. And that's not necessarily the same role as you. And that's all I'm saying. Not that what you're doing isn't important,
No, that's
but
not
that,
that's not what I'm saying. It's more to do with like the moral argument of like what the right thing to do is, and that if everyone has a moral obligation to act according to that.
well, that's a belief system, I guess, isn't it?
Well,
Because who decides what's right and what's wrong?
well, it's about knowing what's right and what is wrong in an objective fashion.
And wouldn't that depend on how you were raised or what country you come from or what religion you were
And that's
raised in?
why it's letting go of all of those things, so you know what is right and wrong in nature. That's what that process is.
Yeah, and I think you're always going to have a bunch of people not agreeing on that because it's just going to be one of those things where someone's going to think this is right and someone's going to think that's right.
Right, and that's where subjective morality, like the pushback against people saying that whatever's right and wrong is subjective. There's a pushback against that because there is a true right and wrong. But again, I didn't necessarily want to get into all of the details of natural law. I wanted the point of that I wanted to get to is more of your sharing, and when you're talking about that creative part of it, and being in that state with neutrality, and the blue lily helped you with that. Where does imagination fit into this in terms of and these beings that you referenced in terms of how they operate in that creative capacity? So rather than just being about clearing the death urge or working on personal law, that actively singing something up or actively creating something, rather than so it isn't in that resistance and it's not in that duality, so to speak. So how does imagination fit into that? And is that specifically with the blue lily, is that part of that threefold transformation part of that? Is that where that part comes into?
I don't really think that imagination has anything to do with it because it's not really. I'm not really into visualization and imagining things. I just think it's like for me, my path has been more about learning how to surrender control and learning how to surrender to what life is. And so I don't really relate to the concept of imagination. I relate to the concept of merging with life, which is like, for me, has been like a lifelong journey of trying to understand what that is, and not be terrified of losing myself when I do that. And so the parts of me that are attached to who is Cacey, they don't want to merge with the source of life because they are afraid that they will disappear. So when I relate it to the concept of the blue lily, it reminds me of, where does the blue lily come from? How did it get to Earth? What is it doing here? What are its messages and its teachings? And I experienced that as being like a feeling of letting go of every blockage and every fear that I have of just being held by life itself, the energy of life. And to me, like, that is a mystery. It's a mystery that I came here to kind of learn, and it's a mystery that I feel like we really struggle to find words for, or that doesn't really fit into any system. It doesn't really fit into a pathway. It's just a state of being that comes from an opening that followed on from years and years and years of that work of undoing all of those little beliefs and thoughts that were not me. So the bottom of the death urge is, for me so far, has been, I'm afraid that I will disappear, or I'm afraid that I will not exist. And so that's the edge of that thought system for me. And so what the blue lily helped me with was to get out of the left and the right, the masculine, the feminine, the right and the wrong. And like, this is a big process. Like, I'm barely able to put words to it. But that's what it's been like. It's like experiencing the transmissions, or the knowledge, or whatever you want to call it, of that plant is, like, you're really just afraid of not existing. Like, if you were to give up the biggest fear that you have, what would it be? If you were to let go of the last thing that's stopping you from actually letting life flow through you so strongly that that's all that there is, what would that fear be? So that's where the blue lily took me. And every plant really, and to some extent, takes me part of the way to that journey, because they prepare you. Like, my experience has been is just that plants prepare you for whatever is to come next. And I guess that's the concept of initiation. That's what initiation is. It's preparation for the next step, whatever that step is. So this concept of openness So the blue lily opens during the day and then closes at night, or closes early afternoon actually, but technically closes at night and opens during the day, which is why you have all these pictures in Egypt in the temples of like the closed lily and the open lily. Like it's the phase of the inhale, the exhale, the masculine, the feminine, the destruction and the creation. But then the central point is what the plant is actually really about, which is the central point is either life or death. And the teaching is really that they're the same thing, that there isn't really a difference. And to be honest, like, I don't really even understand it fully. I'm just along for the ride. Like with that, I just keep getting new layers of understanding of what life is, inch by inch, as I follow the steps that are put in front of me. And so for me, the experience of that has been getting out of resistance to following the steps that have been put in front of me. Because we think that we need this, we think that we need that, we think that we want this, we want that. But when you're manifesting things, anybody can manifest their will. But I'm not actually here to manifest my will, and I'm not here to manifest my will onto a blueprint or onto anyone else. I discovered through my personal law and through doing these practices that I'm here to kind of go after the mystery of life, whatever that is. So that's what I got from that plant. The thing with plants is that they give you what you need, whatever it is. Like, that's not necessarily what the next person's going to get from that plant. And this is why it can be hard to work with people with plants, because people want to know, I want to work on this, I want to work on that. But plants will give you what is in alignment for you for your next step. And so that's not necessarily the thing that you want, and it's not necessarily the general teaching of that plant. I mean, I've had very psychedelic experiences with rose, which isn't even really a psychedelic plant, or isn't touted to be a psychedelic plant, but they give you what you need if you show up with with humility and say, all right, well, you can see more than me. Plant consciousness in my belief, is way more expanded a lot of the time than humans. And so what they can see is good for us. If that's good enough for them, it's good enough for me. So, like for me, it's a process, like I said, of letting go of the resistance to being in the flow of life, whether it comes through the teaching of a plant, or whether it comes through the teaching of a person, or, a political climate. Like, to me, there really isn't any difference. Like, it's an energy that's coming to me, and if it's not going away, then there's something in it that I have to experience. That's, my experience of reality.
Yeah, that was great.
Related to the belief system that I hold. It might be related to a belief system. It might be me bashing my head up against a wall of something that I don't want to let go of. That's possible. But it may also just be, oh, this is the next step for me, and I've just got to let go of the fear of moving into whatever this next phase is, because initiation often goes hand in hand with fear.
Yes.
So, and fear, like, if you're feeling afraid, oftentimes you're on the right track. Not because I want people to be afraid, but because something is being challenged in you that may or may not be in your best interest. And it's up to your own personal discernment to decide, is that fear an intuitive message from your higher self saying, this is not good for you, move away? Or is it a fear, which is a fear of you giving up a part of yourself that you're attached to that is blocking your path forward? And that is the $1 million question, is which one is it? Because this is one of the things that when you're in that experience, sometimes it can be hard to know which one it is. And that's why in some cases I will go to a plant or another practitioner to help me, because we are so kind of in the forest that we can't see the trees. I mean, these are the tests. These are the big tests on the path of initiation, of getting better and better at kind of navigating portals of movement through new energies that we haven't faced before. That's my experience. Like I remember when like early on in the picture, I would go into the lake with the lily and I would feel like the plant was just trying to pull me down to the bottom of the lake and hold me there and drown me. Like, stay down here, don't go back up to where the world is, where you can breathe. Now, me being me, that didn't really scare me, and I didn't think, oh, this plant's a negative entity that I have to run away from, it's trying to kill me. I didn't think that. What I thought was, this is interesting, because it was the next step. You know, like there was already some trust built with me and that plant before that happened. But I'm in the water and this plant's trying to show me death, death, death. Come here, let me kill you. And it's a process of seeing a representation of what's happening for you in that moment and not being afraid of the next step. Like, well, being afraid, but doing it anyway. And trusting the process, because even if you make a mistake, it doesn't matter. You just do it again. Like, that's been my experience. If I get tested and I fuck it up, a cycle comes around again and I get tested again, and it's a similar thing in a different scenario, slightly different energy, same lesson. And I guess that contributes to my concept that I feel like I'm living in an earth school, because that's been part of my experience. But like I said before, I would still consider that a belief system that may or may not be true as well. That is just based on my experiences. But plants, generally speaking, have just prepared me for my next energetic incarnation. And because I have a sun in the 8th house, there is a lot of those. There is a lot of energetic incarnations for me in this lifetime, and that's something that I'm becoming more and more okay with as I move through the process. But that's not the same for everyone. Some people, this is why I hold true to my fact that not everybody is here to experience whatever is going on in the way that it's going on. Because some people get married and have children and have the same husband their whole life, live in one house, never move. Meanwhile, there's me over here that's lived feels like I've lived like a million lifetimes in one. And I spiral through transformations quite quickly. And then other people having completely different experience and would not relate to anything that I'm saying. So, you know, like that's why I kind of feel like, you know, live and let live is a little bit of my process on how I see the universe.
Yeah, I think it's more language than anything, but we can talk about, you know, the different parts like another time or whatever. Because what you just said was really profound, I think. And so I don't know what the question is here. I'm not sure if it's like what plants or maybe people that are kind of less as far along with that work. But it kind of touches on similar kinds of questions, which is like you talked about how the plants helped you like essentially like emerge with what is or what life is. To kind of open up and to kind of go into that rather than being in fear or resistance. So I guess one of the things that, you know, has a particular thread here around a lot of different fields or whatever, which is kind of what you're talking about with immortality, but it's like you don't want to, so it's one thing to be anti-death, so to speak, but then it's also when you're talking about being in that neutral part and merging with life. I think that from what I've seen, I think that it's that part of like trusting or knowing what your higher self is, and being able to kind of merge with that life part. So I know you just kind of talked about that already, but I have seen that that's kind of maybe like a next step, or there's a lot of people that are kind of more in that, this is what's going on part, and it needs to, yeah. So I'm not sure if there's particular plants or anything else that you wanted to add, because you already talked about that part, but or did you have anything else to say on that?
Yeah. So the plant that would be right for you would be whatever one you are drawn towards, because it really depends exactly where you are in the process. Some people need strengthening before they can go to the next step. Some people need lightening before they can go to the next step. Some people, they might need, and it's really not even plants. Like, I was just having this really interesting conversation the other day with somebody about naturopathy and healing, and how, like, the right process for healing or the right medicine for healing for each person, really, if we're looking holistically, could be anything. And like in naturopathy, we have this thing called hydrotherapy, where you're just healing with water, and there's no plant involved. Water is the medicine. It's either hot water or it's cold water, or it's some form of water. So, and we were talking about in history how people used to like take the waters and walk to like the healing springs, or be sent to the ocean for 3 or 4 or 6 months if they had a lung condition. Like, doctors would send somebody, go live in the ocean for 6 months, go live by the ocean, that'll heal your lungs. So it's just this concept of like, what's next? The way to strengthen your antenna in order to get clearer and clearer about what is really truly me and what's right for me and what's other noise, is to start to listen to what your antenna is telling you over what other people say. So, and that's why a lot of people get drawn towards detoxes and things like this, because a part of that process is cleaning up the internal terrain physically and mentally, so that the terrain is providing you with answers that are relevant for your growth, and not just like, oh, I've got heaps of candida, so I'm craving sugar. Yes, you're going to crave sugar. That's not a message from your body. That's a message from the out of balance organisms. But that will also take you to the next step. So that it kind of, the way I see it is, it's kind of no mistake. Even if you continually follow that and eat heaps of sugar, at some point that's going to develop into a disease, and that's going to redirect you back onto path again, because you'll have to treat that disease. So there isn't really a wrong thing. But if you get a clean terrain, like internally, with all these different things that people tend to move towards detoxes, however you want to do it, you're going to clean out things that are unhelpful. You're going to clean out things that will make you susceptible to the types of energies that you're like at. If you're removing the things that are going to make you susceptible to external sources that are trying to control you, then you're strengthening yourself and moving towards a more a path that is cultivated for your highest good and not cultivated for anything else. So if you're feeling a desire to do something, like, I really feel like I need to go to the ocean, or I really feel like I just want to eat vegetables today, like I just feel heavy, or feel like I want to clean myself up, I want to go buy a detox kit, just each little step, each little message, just follow it. Don't analyze it, don't question it, don't ask someone else what they think. Just follow it. And you follow the messages that come from your own antenna, that strengthens your antenna with every step. So once your body and your system gets that you're listening, the messages often get louder and easier to hear until it just becomes a part of your whole integrated self, that you just follow a system, like you follow what's coming from within. So in counselling, it's called an internal locus of control. And what you're discussing, the things that are happening in the outside world, we call that an external locus of control. So I'm being influenced and controlled by what's happening outside of me, or I'm being internally driven. Even if that internal driver is not necessarily a good thing by somebody else's standards, it might be a good thing at the time. Like I've just been listening to a really lovely gentleman who's a naturopath that I've been kind of interested in listening to a lot of his stuff recently. And he said that within, like, and this is kind of what I hear from people that I respect, within every system, there needs to be balance. Some days your body's going to say, look, I really need, you've been doing fasting or you've been doing detoxing, and then your body's going to say, look, I really need to ground and integrate this. I'm going to stop doing this. I'm going to be feeling like I need to eat some sweet potato, or feel like I need to eat something heavier, or I just want to go out and go to a party and drink some alcohol or do something like this. It's not necessarily what you consider on path, but sometimes we need to balance our system, and we're getting way too serious about what's happening in our lives and way too serious about what's going on. You have to know where you're at in the process, and sometimes you can't maintain like really intense energies for really long periods. Sometimes you need to put your foot off the gas and just relax, and sometimes it can look like you're going backwards, but it's still a true message coming from yourself to integrate your path as you go. It's not all go, go, go from one initiation to the next. That's not how it works. And in my experience, especially now that we're living in a world where we are having to live an everyday life, well, I am, and then also do kind of personal transformation work. We're not in a cave, and in medieval Europe in the 1600s, and some person is not bringing me my meal every day. Like, we're in a place where we have to care for ourselves. Often we also have to care for children or other people as well. And so sometimes you're in a process of transformation, but you need to just put it on pause and just integrate for a while. And you might stop your detox, you might stop doing all of your practices, and you might just go live a bit of a normie life for a while. And that is also not off track. It's still in alignment with what is right for you if it's internally driven. Mm-hmm. So this is why I don't judge what other people are doing in their path, and I don't necessarily think that they're wrong just because they're doing something that I don't think looks right from where I am, because I know that sometimes I've had clients that have done really good work with rebirthing, for example, but they'll do a series of rebirthing processes with me, and then they go away for like 7 or 8 or 9 years, and I don't hear from them or see them. And then 10 years later, they come back and go, all right, I'm ready for the next round. Like, sometimes it takes however long it takes. And these processes can be so big that it can take decades to integrate things. So that's the perspective that I come from with it. I'm like, you've got to listen to your internal messages, and you've got to discern if you're being influenced, but also if you're in balance. If you've been hella serious about going down the path of transformation for 15 years and you've just had a gutsful and you just need a break, sometimes you just need to take the accelerator off. And a lot of people can testament to the process of sometimes letting go from the work and just stepping away from it and just doing nothing and relaxing and just having a normal existence. In some cases, this is when the most profound shifts can happen, because we're not attached to trying to transmute or transform. We've given up our resistance and our attachment to wanting to get a result. And so we've just, you've got to drop the wheel sometimes and let the car drive itself. Because if you're holding on too tightly to the wheel, you can be resisting unknowingly your own growth. And this is what I mean about me being at that place of surrendering to life, because I know that I can create stuff if I want to, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what I need to do. And sometimes there are bigger things to focus on than how much of whatever particular thing I want to manifest. I'm not looking to impose my will upon this place that I'm in right now. That's not my journey. So I guess that's how I'm experiencing it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great place to leave it, unless there's some other stuff you wanted to go through. But I guess the part that I took out of that is like a relaxing or a surrendering into a life, and when that will can be aligned with a highest good, and your highest good can also be more than just what's going on in you on an individual level, because there's also the bigger stuff playing out as well. But yeah, I mean, imposing will upon something is, it's when it's coming from a heart-centered place and from personal guidance and things, wills are, that's when will can be utilized. But yeah.
Yep.
Did you want to talk about anything else before, for Solstice, before we get going? We've been going for a bit over an hour and a half.
No, I don't really have anything that I need to share. Just, I just really would like everybody to have the most fulfilling experience that they can have, and just move towards whatever is the most fulfilling experience for you. And if you care about what happens to other people around you at the same time, then that also doesn't kill you.
Yeah. Yeah, care's a big one. Thank you so much for joining, and I really appreciate you taking the time, Cacey. Always have been a really clear vessel of information in my experience, and always listen to what you have to say. And thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for listening, and thank you for sharing everything that you've said today as well. It's interesting.
Thanks.